it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. It doesn't matter where I'm at in the world. If I have a story that I feel needs to get made, it's going to get made.
Jadon, you come from a family of artists. How did you know you were an artist?
How did I know I was an artist, man? I loved acting when I first got the opportunity to do it. I remember my dad and my mom, they would play music. We would have boogie nights. Actually, boogie nights was a song that we used to dance to, I remember, but I was so short. When I was maybe 5 years old, I remember standing up on our living room little coffee table and dancing eye level with my parents. That might have been the first moment. But I also grew up loving stories, loving fantasy, seeing, movies like Harry Potter or just, fantastical stuff I fell in love with. And yeah, I think I started writing short stories and, drifted off and escaped reality. So I guess those would be the first moments.
And your mom and dad, are they both in the industry, or they were?
Yeah. So they are both still in the industry, much less so. My parents were very active in the 90s, definitely. Yeah, my dad was an action hero kind of actor, Delta Force, also did soap operas. My mom did commercials. She had an American Express commercial that went for 13 and a half years, which was crazy. But she was, she had a couple small parts in movies. She worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger on Junior, where she was a pregnant woman. And she always tells this, story where she's sitting next to Arnold and she says something to him and she does this impression of him when she says that, he almost got her fired, and she was like, "Oh, she's too funny." And so she, that's her claim to fame on the film stuff. But yeah, my parents were both actors, and my dad taught acting classes, and I grew up in his acting classes.
Okay, oh, interesting. But then you probably already saw or I shouldn't assume, but you may have seen a lot of the waiting around, a lot of the near misses.
No, I don't know if I noticed that, because my dad was a writer as well, so he was always working, writing. My mom, was more stay at home when she wasn't doing gigs. And then my dad also, at one point, he had a job at Universal, right across the street from where we lived. So no, I didn't really notice that until I was in my late teens. I think I noticed it. When we moved to Florida and my dad started just fundraising his own movies, this was in the early 2000s before self-tapes, and, the way the internet is now, we were, when you move out of LA, you're out of LA, you're out of the network. Nowadays you can kind of be anywhere, but back in the day, it's 2004, I think we moved. I noticed a big shift when he stopped working on films and doing stuff. And then he started fundraising for his own movies, and then I saw how tough it could be. And that's when we started eating peanut butter on bread for a while. But I would say I noticed it, probably late teens.
Okay, so then you maybe learned sort of the ebb and flow of the tightening the belt, and then other days it's filet mignon or whatever.
No, because there would be days, or months where we would, a big thing would come in, and like even my dad living in Florida, he booked a couple big movies like into the 2010s. Dolphin Tale was a big one with Morgan Freeman, he booked, and things like that. But it wasn't as often as when he was starring in big movies, in the early 2000s, late 90s.
But it was in your blood. It sounds like that. You didn't let that scare you away.
No, I've always had this burning thing in here where I had these ideas and these stories and these things, this purpose of affecting people because of or trying to show people something or send a certain message has always been my something that's like a calling, I guess. Writing probably more than acting. I love acting so much, but writing is something I can't get away from. It's always just burning. And so if I were to step away from it, I don't know if I could fully shut it down.
It's funny, you mentioned purpose, and that was actually my next question, which is, I get the sense that you feel very strongly about things, and that whatever you do, it's very purpose-driven,
Yeah.
or whatever you don't do. Has that always been in you?
Yes and no. I think growing up, purpose wasn't always my goal. You know how it is growing up as a kid, teenager. You just, want to hang out and be cool with whoever you're friends with, and be on people's good sides and stuff like that. I don't think I really found my purpose until I went through some traumatic stuff, 19, 20 years old, and turned my life around 180 degrees and really just dove into storytelling. I think before that it was kind of just, there wasn't purpose until I had a big life change.
How do you know that you're on the right path?
I think there's a sense of peace to guide you when you're on the right path. Like I was telling you guys, I just came from church. I think, I'm a Christian. I believe that, there's a guiding that the Spirit I'll know if it's on the path. You get kind of a feeling, people might not want to call it a spiritual thing. They might, but the gut feeling, for example, my mom would always say, always trust your gut. So I think it's an intrinsic feeling in your own being, to where even if something's chaotic, or if something's wrong, or if something's dangerous that you're in, you can still feel a sense of calmness and peace because you're where you're supposed to be, and you're just going through that place. If you don't feel that, I would say you probably know where you should be, and go back to the last thing that you knew you were supposed to do.
So you've kind of tested yourself, it sounds like. How like we kind of don't test our intuition or whatever it is, and then we're like, you know what? I should have listened.
Yeah. Oh, that's one of the greatest themes of my stories I tell. A concept I have is that there are physical consequences to spiritual decisions. And so I've noticed that in my own life, right? If I walk off the path, if I fall off the road, that I literally at one point I got in a car accident for making bad decisions. And people might say, oh no, it was coincidence. You might have been in a bad headspace and you might have been this, but that was just a car accident. And I said no, because I was in prayer and saying like, I need a wake up call, like pull me out of this. And then I saw a motorcyclist wipe past me on the highway, and I thought, I literally had a vision of like an accident. I started praying over the highway, and then I came back on the highway later that night, 9-car accident. And so purpose is huge for me, and I think I veered off your original question.
Oh, this is great.
But yeah, there are purpose, and for me, storytelling it has to be purposeful. I think that's why Hollywood is failing in so many ways. I mean, you look at all these movies that are bombing. It's because there's no purpose. It's because people are just they're just throwing money at things that made money in the past that might have had purpose before, but the purpose now is to make money, and people see that and they're like, oh well, this has no substance anymore, so let me go watch this. Or they go watch their favorite creator on TikTok or Instagram who has purpose in their own little way. And so I think getting back to purpose in the cinema will draw audiences back.
If you don't feel like you're growing artistically, mentally, spiritually, how can you tell, and how do you change it?
I don't know if you can tell, because I think that's how people, that's kind of the scary thing, because people end up 30, 40 years down the road and they say, how did I get here? So I don't know if you can tell unless you're diligent about it, and unless you're really intentional. I think that's the key, is being intentional with everything in life, and looking at everything you're doing in life, and is this something that's an idol in my life? Am I worshiping this? Or is this serving others? Or is this serving myself? Is this a selfish ambition? And even if it is beneficial to me, is there a way I can also have it help others? Does this have negative impacts on my body, on my mind? Do I have negative thoughts because I listen to that or watch this? I think, you just have to be intentional. And
are you intentional with every role, with every story that you write, and every film that you become a part
You
of?
know, more and more as I get older, I am more intentional. I think when I first started, I was willing to just do anything, not anything, but I was willing to do, you know, a wider range of projects because I just wanted to get more of a resume, get my face out there, that sort of thing in terms of acting. But now I'm really, really getting more picky, even though I might not, I might not be at the place where, you know, people would say, oh, you can be picky now, because it's not like, you know, my phone's ringing off the hook or anything, but no, I definitely am getting more picky to, and even in the past when I've done certain movies, like maybe even a certain horror movie, that if I would read a script and I'd be like, okay, well, this doesn't have much that I feel like an audience member is going to take away from it, I would look at the role I was offered and I would say, okay, well, what is the lesson in my character? What are they going through, and what transformation can the audience see in my character in the movie that they can take something from, if not the whole movie? So yeah, but definitely my goal is to always do purpose-driven stuff.
Creatively, do you ever have fears about regret, such as you're worried that you won't be able to get to play a certain role? Or that things won't turn out the way you want? Does regret or fear ever factor into your creative life?
I think I used to have a lot of fear about my future. And I think it was especially when I was younger, early 20s, late teens. And it was before I really even knew what I was doing. But the more I've become secure in myself outside of film, I've started to really let go of that and I used to feel like I needed to get somewhere or be somewhere. And I remember there was a movie I did in 2021, Loss of Essence. It was this super low budget movie shot in the woods for 2 weeks. And it was this, you know, I was inspired by guys like Johnny Depp, very transformative actors. That's stuff I love. And I remember I really gave my all to this role, and I got to this place and I had just gotten out of a relationship. And I remember thinking about who could I call about this role that I'm doing and how excited I am about this movie. And that was when I realized that the role itself is not the goal. You know, the role is just, it's a great experience to have, and it's something I love to do, but it's not life. It's not what life is all about. In fact, if you look at movies, everyone in a movie or a show, they're playing someone that's living a life. They're a nurse, they're a writer, they're a painter, whatever. That is what life is about, is living life and having relationships and enjoying life and growing and helping people. You know, that's what life's about, and love and these things that we're making it about. If the goal itself is to portray it and not to actually live it, well then, I think it's kind of backwards. So I used to feel that way until I started to really look at my actual life and start to really enjoy it. I had a screening for Off Rip, my skimboarding film in Florida, in our hometown, 200 people, sold out, packed house. And I was more excited for my cousin's baby shower that same week than I was for my own screening, for my movie that took me 4 years to make. I was talking to my girlfriend, I said, wow, I'm more excited about the baby shower and seeing family that I haven't seen. But that, I think, is success.
Do you think some of that comes from growing up around the industry? Because, you know, so many people are so hungry for whatever endeavor it is, and they have to be the next top, and it really can make you compromise a lot of things, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if growing up around the industry really impacted me. I can't even say, so my parents were both actors, but I can't say I grew up around it too much. I mean, I was in acting classes, but it wasn't like an industry vibe kind of thing. It was more so just exploring the craft of acting. And yeah, I don't know if I mean, I loved movies growing up, and I also loved video games and storytelling and stuff, but I think even outside of acting and film, you know, we all have these goals, whether you're a realtor or whatever it is, you know, you want to get to the top and be the best. And of course, you know, that's a great thing to have and to want. But even when you get there, you get to a certain point. I mean, you look at some of these famous actors who get to these places and then hit depression, or they drop out of the industry, they get into drugs. It's because they realize that there's still the void there. And so, I think that's what it is for me, is realizing that it didn't fill me up like I thought it would. Not really anything to do with my childhood.
I understand that you love the book Catcher in the Rye. Why do you think so many people love the character of Holden Caulfield?
I think he sees the world differently, and I think people are interested in individualistic perspectives and people that don't just go along with the crowd. I think we intrinsically cling on to that because we, as a individual human, want to have our own perspective and want to have the courage to do and say what we want to do or say. So sometimes people live vicariously through a story like that where they can experience it without having yet done it. I think, he's a very individualistic thinker. And it's an inspiring story.
And even some of your characters in Off Rip, aren't they sort of like either the black sheep of the family or sort of they like to do their own thing and they're not really led by the crowd?
Yeah, I think so. I actually think the main character, Chris, is led by the crowd, and that's one of his biggest challenges, is overcoming that. So that's actually one of the greater themes in the film, is becoming your own person. There are different characters that might be a black sheep. There's a musician character, but she's a little bit more layered than that. But yeah, you could categorize in that way. And I think in any family dynamic, if anyone looks at their family tree, their cousins, their classroom, there's going to be one or two or three people that stand out in a certain way, whether it's by choice or not.
Right. And so when you write or when you look at roles, is that something that draws you? I mean, it seems like you kind of want to do your own thing, but not in a negative way. It's out of good intentions. You like to sort of be your own person. Yeah,
I'm heavily inspired by actors that I can't predict. I love Joaquin Phoenix. He's one of my favorite actors. I love people that just go and do whatever they're inspired to do. My goal is to really challenge myself and stretch myself, do roles that I've never done before, put myself in an uncomfortable position I've never been in, both in the industry and outside, learn new things and just learn new skills. And I think that's the most fun thing about acting, is getting to experience new things. If I were to play the same type of role, that's kind of one of the reasons I'm not a fan of certain like Lifetime movies, for example. It's, sure, you could create a dynamic character to a certain extent, but it's at the same time, it's sort of a formulaic, it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And there's an audience for that. But for me as an artist, it's just not what I crave. I crave something I've never done before every time. And so I kind of love to just dive off of the cliff and spread the new, squirrel suit wings and see if this one works. That's kind of the goal.
This is just a sidebar, but I had a vision of you sort of like being in one of these survival weekends. Have you ever done that where they drop you off on the top of a mountain?
I haven't, but I did do a thing called Man Camp with my church, actually, in the desert. We spent 3 days in the desert camping, and it was just literally man camp. It was just men. It was, tug of war, paintball, climbing the mountain, and we put a cross in the thing and in the top of the mountain and lodged it in the rocks. And that was, a lot of time in prayer and just spending time together and just sleeping out in the desert. That's probably one of the closer things to it.
Because I was thinking when you talked about Joaquin Phoenix and just taking on these sort of unpredictable roles, I feel like you'd have to really know yourself. And you'd have to have been in some kind of, precarious is the wrong word, but some type of a situation that really tested you where you felt secure in who you were.
Well, it's funny, when I first started seeking those roles, I didn't know myself. I was trying to figure out who I was, I think, through different roles. But now, as I've matured and become more solid in who I am as a person, I still realize that I love transformative work. And, Bill Skarsgård's another great example. I can't wait to see him in Nosferatu. I heard a clip of his voice, the deep roll with the R's and roll, and, that whole thing. They said he worked with an opera coach for a month to lower his voice a whole octave.
Oh, wow.
So I love stuff like that. I just did one of my favorite roles I've ever done. in March. It was a Western, and I played one of the main bad guys, and it was kind of inspired by Val Kilmer's Doc Holliday and Leo's Calvin Candy.
Awesome.
So, yeah, I love those kinds of roles.
You've lived in both LA and Florida. How do you see the mindset difference in approach to the industry?
For myself or for others?
For others, maybe? Like, do you see an urgency in other parts of the U.S.? You've also been to Georgia and places.
You know, I would say LA is probably the most relaxed because people, you know, it's funny when I would travel and visit here, and I would say, I put on my story of Instagram or whatever, I would say, hey, I'm in town for a week, would love to see you guys, whoever wants to take a meeting. Boom, 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 boom. Meeting, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, twice on Thursday, 3 meetings on Friday, right? I move here, hey, would love to see you. 6 months go by, you know? It's one of those things, I think, being in LA, I don't know, people think that just being here, you're gonna make it and then there's not much to do, but I don't know. At the same time, I don't know if you can classify it by region, because I know hustlers out here too. And I'm a hustler and now I'm out here. So, you know, it's not, I don't think you can classify it by region. There's not much of an industry in Florida. A lot of people in Florida, there's a couple, but once they get to a certain place, like, you know, like I feel like I've gotten to a certain place, right? You become a big fish in a small pond, and then you want to, you know, continue to grow and see and meet people that are doing bigger and better stuff. And they eventually relocate to Atlanta, Texas, you know, California, even the Carolinas, Nevada, you know, all these hot spots. But yeah, Florida is, I don't know. I think there is something to be said about a small town. You know, when I first left, I had this burning desire to leave Florida. I went to LA, and then when I came back, I was even more on fire because I had left this big city with all this opportunity and I was in this small town with nothing. And so then I had this burning desire, which is when I met my partner, my producing partner, Jake. And we just cranked it every day for 4 years, essentially. So, you know, I think small towns, there's, you know, you can find a couple people, not much of an industry outside of that. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but.
No, I love it. Do you like that energy of like, I need to make something happen and I want to make it happen soon? Yeah,
you know, I think like the classic phrase, iron sharpens iron, I think it's important to have that, because if you don't have an idea to bounce off of someone, if it's a kind of like an echo chamber just to yourself, it can easily just, you know, people get into procrastination that way because they don't have anyone else to bring them up and to elevate each other. But I think there's a very good energy to that, as long as it doesn't consume you, because I've been consumed by that feeling and by that grind kind of, you know, headspace, to where it's negatively impacted my mental health, you know, my relationships, and just not seeing value in people, and just wanting to, you know, fully soak it, solely focus on the grind. And so I think it's good to a certain extent. I think everything in its proper place, you know, having a good balance of it is good, and which is what I've been getting into in the last, I'd say, year and a half, is finding, just kind of finding the waves that, you know, come up and come down, and resting and being okay, just hanging out, and then, you know, having time where it's, you know, 12-hour days.
It sounds like you like to kind of have that drive. I mean, do you feel good when you wake up with a purpose for a project?
Yeah, so that's the tough thing about acting, is that there's not always that purpose, because you don't always have a gig. Now, you could be in acting classes, you could be, you know, reading plays, you could be doing all these things as an actor, right? But that's why I got into writing and producing, so I could wake up every day and have something to drive me, and have a story to tell, something to say. You know, that's I think that really helped me, was writing. But
you co-wrote something that was military based. We're going to get into that in a little bit.
Mind Games.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So originally there was so I had made the short film Prom Night with Jake. COVID had just hit, and we were watching a movie he had done prior, back in 2017, about a guy locked in his house during a pandemic, and that was called Terror Talk. And so I said, man, because he shot it in one house. I said, man, I want to make a feature film. He's like, you're not ready to make a feature film. And I said, I'm ready to make a feature film. He's like, all right, well, let's watch this. So we watched his movie on Amazon, and he said, I have a sequel to this. And it was written by a guy named Bruce. And so I read over the script, and I said, oh, okay, yeah, we could do this. And I was like, but what if we do this and change this? And so I pretty much came on and kind of rewrote a lot of things. And then we raised a few $1,000 from one guy here, one guy there, I think at 15, 20 grand. And yeah, made the movie during COVID in 4 or 5 locations. Flew out a few actors and did all the work ourselves. You know, Jake was the DP and director. I pretty much helped him gaff everything, and we did wardrobe, and his brother ran sound. And that was my first feature I ever produced for, yeah, about 20 grand. And yeah, and then we edited the film together and did everything all the way through the end, which was a huge learning experience.
If you are writing a story, you may be interested in our new book, the sponsor of today's video. After months of working on a story, have you ever said to yourself, I don't know what my main character wants. Why are my side characters more interesting than my main character? 17 Steps is a workbook-style tool with specific questions to help you dive deep into your main character and story. We've linked up to 17 steps below. Now, back to the video. What were the steps you took to go from actor to screenwriter?
Yeah, so from actor to screenwriter, I acted as a kid. I wrote my first screenplay in 2017, 2018, when I was about 19, 20 years old. The steps I took was, like I mentioned, I had a crazy traumatic experience, and I took that experience of my life, and I took that and just turned it into a screenplay, essentially. That was my first ever screenplay, was based on a true story of my life. And then from there, I just had other ideas that I had imagined, and I had already studied. I read, you know, Save the Cat and some other screenwriting books and blogs and things like that. There's probably some other ones I should read. I know there's Story, and there's you know, How to Make a Good Script Great, and there's I have some of these on my shelf. I haven't finished, but I think it's just doing it. You know, you can only learn so much, and you can only take in so much. You just have to sit down, do it. And you know, one of my favorite phrases that has stuck with me for so many years is that you can't edit a blank page. And so you just have to throw something out there. Like my latest script I have right now, my first draft I wrote over the course of 2 weeks and with about 9 Coronas. And I was sitting on my balcony in West Hollywood and just, you know, I was in that kind of vibe of life. It was when I was reading a lot of Kerouac back then. You know, this was 2022. And I was just like, oh, I bought a 6-pack of Coronas and I'm just typing away. And I'm like, I feel just like Kerouac right now, you know? And then I went back and I looked at it and I'm like, ooh, that's pretty hefty stuff. That's a little much, but, you know, and then you go back and you edit it. And, you know, I've made, you know, 5 revisions to the script, 5 full rewrites, and as well as introduced a whole nother story that was another idea of a movie, a separate movie, is now intertwined. So it's these 2 different movie ideas in this one idea. But that wouldn't have come if I didn't sit down and drink the beers and write for 2 weeks. So I think you just have to do it.
How do you decide what movie ideas to work on and what to throw away? What's your screening out process for your own ideas?
Yeah, in terms of figuring out what to work on, I just follow the inspiration. You know, I have a handful of ideas and different projects I've come up with over time, but I really try to follow what I feel called to at the time. You know, my project that I had started writing, this one I was telling you about back in 2022, it's really made its way back around and called to me over the past handful of months. And I have a couple of other projects that I am developing with other writers. I have a co-writing collaboration I'm doing, but that's taking a bit longer. It's a bit slower, but it's not all mine. So that's, you know, that's something I am also learning how to navigate. But I think when it comes to solo projects, it's whatever I feel that burning passion and desire and thing to write and to tell. Because if I don't feel that when I'm writing it, there's no way an audience is going to feel anything when they're watching it. I have to have that feeling. Because if I'm not wondering and so excited and questioning what's going to happen next to this character, what decision he's going to make, what he's going to say, you know, how this is going to end up, if I don't feel like that as I'm reading my own screenplay, I almost think it would be more of a harm than good to produce.
Sure. So you don't want to necessarily just sort of make a popcorn movie. You want there to be a real, not a message, because I know that that's a bad word right now, but it's something where it really impacts somebody.
Yeah, not necessarily one message. I think movies are so multi-layered. It's hard to, if you only have one message, it's probably not much of a movie, to be honest. But yeah, I would say, yeah, it's really about just having the feeling that pulls you in and following that.
Sure. And that's what got you in 2017, sort of with the coronas, or no,
that was 2022. 2017 was my first screenplay, that I had written about my life. And that was just something that I think it was cathartic for me, getting it out and almost revisiting my near past that I had just lived, and my recent 6 to 8 months I had just lived, and it would help me. I would think about this story, and it would just kind of help me go through and realize, to the fullest extent, the decisions I made and the impact they had on me. And I think they had such an impact on me that I felt it should be a story to tell.
And sorry, did you make that movie?
No, I didn't. I think I was a very amateur writer when I wrote it, and it was my first screenplay. I actually revisited the screenplay and read it, and I would definitely need to rewrite it if I wanted to do that one. But I also don't think it's relevant now. It was relevant at the time. There were certain things in the world that were going on, and particularly in the U.S. law in our country for things I was dealing with. And so it was relevant and made sense, but nowadays it wouldn't. I don't think it would be. That screenplay almost would have needed to be released when I wrote it as a film.
Okay.
So I think the times are gone,
Sure.
And it's more so just a story I have.
How have you gained confidence in your writer's voice?
I can't say I'm fully 100% confident in my writer's voice. Because I'm always trying to grow, and I'm always critiquing my own writing, and then I'm going back and I'm watching other films, or I'm reading other screenplays, and then or even talking to other writers that I'm friends with and I collaborate with, or even I watch back my own film, right? So I directed and edited my own film off rip, and as I'm in the editing room, and I'm like, man, I would have written that differently now, but I wrote the script 3 years ago. And so what I've come to realize is there's always going to be an evolution, and to just be okay with where you're at, but at the same time, be intentional about the growth. I think I've become not necessarily fully just confident, but just comfortable with where I'm at, because what I realized about my last film was, when I look at it, I say, oh, okay, well, that was where I was at the time, and that was the best I could do with what I had known. And so when obviously 3 years later, when the movie's done and it's out, well, I hope I'm a better writer by then, because if I'm not, then there's something wrong.
Well, is that something that is sort of a blessing and a curse, in that maybe at times you're not satisfied with something, and you're always trying to go for more, maybe even in yourself? I know it doesn't mean bigger, better outside of yourself, but is that something that's in you?
Yeah, I think you have to release it at some point, because for me, there is always this desire of making things perfect and better. And even with my film that I'm screening in a couple of days at a theater, I look at that movie and I'm like, oh, I want to fix that, change that. But I would also need a bit more money and a bit more time, and get people back, and bring this company back in to work on the sound, or these little things. And I kind of got to a point where, okay, these are things, this is micromanaging to the greatest level. These are things that only I'm going to notice, and the audience is still going to get impacted the same way, even if this little thing is not adjusted. But it's a great mental note for next time. I make great mental notes of, okay, well, now I know when I make my next film, I need to be really clear to this department about this, because this wasn't fulfilled in this way, for example. And so it's all just a learning experience.
What section of the bookstore or the library do you go to first?
I typically, well, I guess it changes as I age. I know I haven't gotten to age a whole lifetime yet, but it was fantasy at first. And I still go to the fantasy section for sure. Brian Staveley is one of my favorite authors. He's got a great trilogy, The Emperor's Blades, Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne. Great series, and he's starting a new trilogy in the same world, which I read the first one of it. So definitely fantasy. I would say I was in the spiritual section for a little while, Christian, but then also, other just spiritual things. I don't necessarily look into other religions, but, other perspectives, I guess I would say. And then, let's see, yeah, I'd say those are the main two. And I really got, who I really got into is Jack Kerouac. I've read probably 5 of his books, and yeah, I've been getting into, it's kind of the setting and the space that my next film, that my latest screenplay I've written takes place in, is that sort of traveling on the road in the 50s. It's inspired by that. And so I've read a bunch of his books. And I've been getting into really just loving grounded stories that feel fantastical. And I think that's what Jack's life was like. Just bumming it on the road, and you think about that. You're like, man, I live here in this city. I do this on a day-to-day, and what would it be like to just jump on a train and not know where you're going? And that's the magic to his writing, is it is fantasy in reality. So yeah, fantasy, and then drama, adventure.
Have you come close to actually doing it? Just whether it's train or
the traveling. Well, the thing is I've been to almost every state. A lot of it from working on films and projects, but I've taken road trips. I helped a friend renovate a van into a home from LA. We drove up to Michigan in 2018, renovated the van throughout July, spent 4th of July on Lake Michigan, drove back. So I've definitely had my fair share of adventures. I went skydiving last year in Yosemite for the first time. I swam with sharks in Hawaii this year. So yeah, I've definitely had trips. But I've not done it to the point of, full-time living on the road and just bumming it. I've definitely dreamed about it. I've dreamed about taking my guitar and just being one of those guys that's a musician, shows up at bars, plays, for a few hours, makes $100 and just goes to the next town. It's definitely a season of life that I think would be fun. I don't know if I've missed it or if it's in the future, we'll see. But yeah, I haven't quite lived full-time on the road yet.
How does the genre of fantasy influence the stories that you write? You said you used to gravitate more toward them, but...
Yeah, I think fantasy is in everything I write, even if it's a grounded story. There's always kind of a looming spiritual element to it, and there's always a fantastical imagination, at least in the characters themselves, even if they don't have the fantastical life that you might see in Narnia or anything like that. And then also in the filmmaking style and the editing, obviously fantasy is a bigger budget genre, and so I would love to get to that place of making fantastical things. It's always been my dream. I have many stories that are like that. But I think you can find it in the everyday moments of life and in the indie dramas that takes place in a small town on the beach. I think you can find the fantasy just in the way a character looks off in the distance.
When you sit down to write, do you start with an outline?
No, not always. Not really. I don't know if I outlined my first screenplay, and then I realized that wasn't my process. I more so just, I found a process for off-rip that was really fun. It was just writing scenes. It was just, I had the characters in mind. What I did was I took the characters and I wrote, diary entries as if I were the character, just so I could get deeper into their head. And then once I had a better understanding of the characters, I would start to envision what, different scenes that spoke to me that this character might go through. No order, just writing them on pen and paper, on a notepad. And once I compiled them, I started to, shift them a bit. And then, the thing is, though, I guess I have an outline in my head. I kind of know the gist of how a story would go because of the screenwriting books I've read. But I don't like to nail it down. I like to be surprised. And I like to not know what's going to happen, because if I know what's going to happen, it might be a predictable story. So I try to stray away from nailing things down to, this is going to happen on page 12. That's the catalyst, and the first act ends on 25, and on 33, it's the love interest or whatever. I don't like working that way.
Sure. And so you string together these scenes, and then you sort of tie in sort of the through line to these scenes?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the through line is there from the beginning, and then the scenes kind of find their way. You know, it's almost as if you have your through line, which is the, you know, the what is it? The clothespin, wherever you would hang clothes back in the day, before they had dryers. So it's like you have, you know, this whole string, and then you have a scene like this shirt, and you just hang that there, and then you just put this one up here, and then you look at them, and you're like, oh, we'll shift these down, and we'll put the other one here. You know, I kind of just do that with my scenes sometimes, and then other times, you know, my latest screenplay that I've written, I just sat down and had a blank page and started writing, and what would happen next? I don't know. Let's see. Let's just write. And so, but now with that story coming into another one, it's been a lot of revisiting. And what I do instead of outlining is I just, on my notepad on my phone or my notes on my computer, I'll say, oh, I'll come up with ideas even when I'm in the car. I'll have voice memos, and I'll just, you know, say to myself or write it down and say, oh, this happens. Let's try this scene, try this moment, or you know, what if the character went through this or change this about this scene? You know, I know it's very broad. I'm not giving specific examples, but it's really just, you know, continuing to live in the world, I think. You know, so as I'm going about my day, the screenplay is living in my head. It's living with me. I'm the character. I'm in his world. And so yeah, it just kind of falls into place, and I don't know, it's magical. I can't really explain it.
Is there a scene, maybe of a film that you have not written, that's like one of the most perfect scenes? Maybe the rest of the movies...
That I've seen?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe the rest of the movie's just okay, but there's like one scene when you said it's magical that you could watch that scene every day and not get tired of it.
Oh, man, one of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. I don't know if there's a particular scene. I just think it's such a beautiful story that goes through someone's whole life. I don't know any other movie that really does that so great. And just Forrest is so innocent, and he's so likable, and he's so lovable, and he loves people, and he just wants to be, he's just a good person. I would say there's so many scenes just with him sitting on a bus stop, and he's this multi-millionaire CEO of the, you know, Bubba Gump Shrimp, and telling this story, me and Bubba, we were just here doing this, and then the girl's like, wait, you're Bubba Gump? You know, that whole thing, like just his demeanor, and just those kinds of dynamics I just love.
Yeah, it's basically a perfect film. I know some people are critical of it. I love it. Yeah, Eric Roth did an amazing job. Once you start writing a screenplay, how often do you work on it? How often do you write?
Yeah, so with my most recent one, it was one of those things where I would be working on it nonstop. I would wake up and instantly be working on it, and by the time I go to bed, I would be jumping out of bed to go rewrite something. But now, for example, I've done a full draft of it, a new draft. I call it draft 4.5. Now it's kind of done for now, and it'll kind of just sit. I send it out to a couple people. I'll go back and read it in a couple weeks, and then I'll think about it, and then I'll make some notes, and it'll kind of just ruminate, and it'll just be this thing that just is in my head again. And then I'll have a moment where it's not even really a planned thing, like, oh, on this date I need to rewrite this. It's really one of those things of like, okay, I'm just going to think about this until something new calls to me, and if it doesn't, well, then maybe it's ready to make. You know.
And then do you give it to Jake or someone else to look over?
I did send it to Jake. He hasn't read it yet. He's not much of a reader. He's a shooter. He's very visual. Yeah, I like to send it to other screenwriters. I like to do to get script coverage sometimes, which I haven't done yet with this one, but I'm going to look into doing. And then, you know, I like to also just make pitch decks and make things that are visual. I like to start working on the visuals of what the screenplay is of what the movie's gonna look like, you know, just images of the characters and things like that, and really just start building out the world visually. And then what I'll do is I'll take it to different producers or people I know, or, you know, just start showing the idea to people and seeing how it resonates.
Yeah, well, maybe we can include a link to your, in the below the line section, to your YouTube channel, where you did sort of a video about a casting process and pitch deck, and it was excellent, and I thought it would be useful. I enjoyed watching it, and you had sort of who you envisioned and the character breakdown, and so.
Yeah.
What are the most important parts of the writing process for you?
Yeah, I guess I don't really think about the writing process because I don't really think about the technicalities of it, I guess. It's just for me what it feels like. And there's a book called The Art of War, or The War of Art. It's the opposite, The War of Art.
Yeah.
And so he talks about just inviting the muse and sitting there and just allowing it to come down. He talks about how you're, as a creative, you're an antenna and you're picking up the signal of whatever it is, and that there's other people with antennas. And I kind of believe that's true because I've had ideas for screenplays, and even one that I've written, and then it sort of ended up becoming a movie. There's another version of it that sort of became a movie a couple of years later, which it came out in 2021 or 2022, and I had written this other script in 2020. And it's a very similar idea came out, and I was like, wow, that they had the same antenna. They hit the same frequency, you know? So, yeah, I think... I don't, honestly, I actually don't know where I was going with that.
No, I like that. It's Stephen Pressfield, the War of Art, and he talks a lot about resistance. Is that something that factors into your creative practice? I feel like you go for things, but maybe I'm misreading it.
The whole resistance thing, I guess I feel it every now and then, but really, since I'm also an actor, I think I just have, and I edit my own stuff, I'm not just a writer, not that just screenwriting would be a bad thing. I almost would love that at some points. Maybe if I was only writing, I would get burnt out at points. But since I take breaks from writing just because of working on a film as an actor, I get inspired by that, or I have to edit my film, you know, different things like that. I almost don't spend enough time just writing to where I even reach resistance, because by the time I get back around to writing, I haven't done it in a while, and I love it, and I'm excited, you know?
As a writer, what steps do you take to develop and build character?
Yeah, in terms of building character, it's really, well, actually, I use a lot of references from people that I've met and know. That's something I learned that Wes Anderson did. And, you know, when I wrote my first screenplay, it was based on a true story, so that was very easy. And then, you know, as I wrote Off Rip, for example, a lot of those characters were based on real people. Whether it was a previous relationship, someone's mom that I had met somewhere, you know, different characters. One of my old best friends in high school, a lot of those characters were inspired. So I'd start with kind of their archetype, I guess, or how they are as a person, and I would kind of infuse their spirit into the character, and then obviously, and then kind of build out from there and create from there. I think that's kind of the thing when people say write what you know. I mean, if you don't do that, then you really need to build out who these people are just from scratch, which is kind of hard to do straight from imagination. You know, a lot of my main characters, the main characters of my movies are often based on myself, and then I build from there because I just find it's more natural for me to tell a story that way. I don't know. I mean, I have one female-driven story where the main character is a female, and I found that one was harder for me to write because I don't relate as much, and so I think starting with what you know is the biggest thing.
How has being an actor helped you write characters?
Oh wow, acting has helped me so much with writing. I think I learned, well, first of all, when I read screenplays as an actor and I read the dialogue and how things are written, and then I go to say it and I say to myself, oh, this feels clunky. I wouldn't say that. Oh, this feels awkward. Why? That's very on the nose. It just doesn't make sense. Or if it's the opposite of that. Well, whoa, that is so subtle but so profound. It's a great piece of writing. Acting has just tremendously helped me. I think. I just think the whole experience from even going on set and getting to live out the roles and even if you're writing action, for example, if you're an actor and you go experience an action scene, and for example, I did a short film where I trained and I did Muay Thai and I had a fight scene, I got kicked in the ribs, I got kicked spinning back kick and hit against a Coca-Cola machine that I didn't have a shirt on, and I fell to the ground, and it was concrete and this whole thing. So now when I go to write a fight scene, I'm like, okay, let me think of the actors here. What looks good and what is impactful, but what will not kill my talent, especially if I don't have a stunt team. You know, I mean, typically you want stunt actors or, you know, on a bigger budget. But yeah, I think it makes you very aware of everything.
And is awkward dialogue necessarily a bad thing? I mean, life is awkward. There's awkward scenarios every day.
Yeah, I think if it's intentional, it's good. But if something, for example, is supposed to be really dramatic or this, you know, this, typically I think sometimes amateur, younger writers, and even myself, when I want something to be really impactful, I'll really strive to make it impactful, and that's what makes it corny. You almost have to, you know, pull back from that. So I learned that from acting, you know, less is more. There are times where, you know, I just did an audition last night where this character's dialogue was written in all caps. Is this character with bipolar disorder, and he's exclamation points and big capitalization, and one of the takes I did it that way, and then I was like, oh, it just doesn't feel natural. But maybe it's okay that it's not natural because he's bipolar. But at the same time, I think I still need that natural urge to come out and feel that thing. So the take I ended up using was a take where all the stuff that was in caps, I was very much just saying like this. And then there was a moment where that anger or that moment came out of me at a different moment. So I think when writers or actors or any artist, you try to force it to fit a certain moment just because that's when it has to be that, I think that's when it can get dangerous.
What questions should a writer be asking themselves about their characters?
I think a writer should ask themselves everything about their characters, you know. I think if you know your characters as well as you know yourself, if I know, I was telling a young guy this who was asking me about screenwriting, who said he wanted to write his first script. And we were sitting in a restaurant right after we wrapped a short film that I had just directed a month ago, 2 months ago maybe. And he was like, I want to write my first screenplay. What do I need to know about writing? And I said, this is what you need to know about writing. He said, what do you mean? I said, this place right here. You know who you are, right? You know where you just came from. You know where you live. You know who your mom is. You know the trauma you have in your life. You know who I am to a certain extent. You don't know me that well, but you see what I look like. You know, you can, you know, understand the kind of person I am maybe. You see these different people around you. You need to know all of these different people that are experiencing this, that are in your story, as well as you know yourself and, you know, the person you're going back home to go live your life as. You need to know all your characters like that. And then when they all come and converge in this room, you know what they're all going to say because you know all of them.
I like that. How does a writer get to know themselves better?
Experimentation, I think. Just living life, I guess. Reading books, you know, finding out what it is you believe and why you believe it, and being open, you know. You don't, you know, the tough thing with social media and the way things are these days, it's like people can easily get stuck in their own, what they call the whole echo chamber thing of, you know, everyone, whether it's the left, right, you know, political stuff, religious stuff, people get so stuck in their group. I think it's being open-minded, exploring, being willing to fail, you know, trying new things, whether it's a hobby, a skill, a career, you know, just pushing yourself to do new things and to not settle into, it's good to have routine, of course, you know, and to have your daily things you do and who you are in your life, but, you know, finding the little sparks of moments to have outside of that, I think.
Do you ever thrive on that where you're like, ooh, wait a minute, I'm kind of uncomfortable here. Actually, this might be good. I might be getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, you know, being uncomfortable always pushes me to do more. I'm almost scared of being too secure, although it does seem nice sometimes. But there are other times where, you know, I think if I really had everything I wanted, I mean, would I be pushing for what I'm doing? I don't know if I would.
Are there any strategies or techniques that you use as an actor that help you write characters?
Yeah, you know, as an actor, I do a lot of journaling. I like to when I get a role. Typically for auditions, I do a little bit, but when I really dive into a role, it's the same sort of thing of figuring out everything about that character, And I think translating that into, if you as an actor do all that, as a writer, how much more? Because you're creating that person. Of course, there's collaboration, and some people say the script is the skeleton and, the actor brings the life. Yes, that's great, but you need to really give a good foundation, as the writer. So I think I took that from maybe my acting, was just journaling and really finding out who I am as the character.
So you have your own journals as Jadon, and then you have your journals as the character, or you don't journal as Jadon?
No, I do journal as Jadon.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Okay.
not as much as I used to. There was a point where I would journal every single day, but now I think it's less so. But yes, I do journal as Jadon and then the character.
Right. Have you ever gone back and read some of those journals?
Oh yeah. It's so interesting to see different seasons of life I've been in, what my thought process was, and how maybe scared I was for something in the future, or how heartbroken I was. And then I look back at it and I see the timeline, and I'm like, oh, must be what it looks like to see it from God's perspective, because you know what's going to happen. For example, when I read those journals from 4 years ago, well, I know where that character ends up.
Why did you work on your first feature film, Mind Games, for free?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't getting paid to do it. I think I had to create my own work. Yeah, if I think if you're getting into the film industry for money, you're getting into it for a very wrong reason. There is not much money in film, especially against TikTokers and Instagram and all the social media, the Twitch streamers, everything. Film is just not the medium to go in for money. I just loved it. I love storytelling, and I found something I was passionate about, and I had a partner who had a story, and yeah, we dove into it.
And how has that sacrifice, if you want to call it that, working for free, paid off for you?
Oh, it's paid off in so many dividends. It's an investment. The amount of time and money I've spent into my career yes, it's been a lot. And people would probably look at me and say, oh, you're just insane. You could have spent all your time learning this skill or that thing and made so much more money or success or blah, 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 right? When I first started, I spent $5,000 probably of my own money from working at a restaurant, and I got into videography and invested in that. And then, I got into a car accident and I got like 11 grand, and I took 6 of it and made a short film. I've just done it over and over and over. But with that, there is a return. Not only is the return, the biggest return is the experience and learning and understanding, new things through the experience. But then other returns are more jobs. Through believing in myself and showing I can do it, pushing myself to do a certain role in my own film, or to write a certain script or produce a certain short film, has led me to other jobs.
And it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, and having a purpose and intention, and that's very important to you. So you said you could have made money doing X, Y, or Z, but it also has to be something that you want to spend your life doing.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, sure, money's great, but yeah, if there's no purpose, you make all this money, and then what? What are you doing with it? Money is just a tool, right? The film is just a tool. It's just a tool for me to reach an audience and either say something subtly that I want to say, or to give them an experience and to let them, meditate on it and think about their life because of it, and how, they might make a decision differently.
Why not just act?
I can't just act. I have this burning thing in me, this thing to write. Why not just write? Well, maybe I could just write. Maybe down the line. I've been really and the thing with acting is there's so many roles that I read for auditions sometimes, and I don't care to do them these days. I'm like, man, what am I feel like I'm 50 years old toward the end of my acting career or something. I'm still young. Why do I feel this way? But it's because a lot of, if I'm pursuing things with a purpose and for that intention, and I don't find purpose in the acting role, well, then that's probably why, or if it's not a challenge or whatever it is. So writing is probably, if there were one thing I would do only, it might be writing.
When did you realize that diversifying your skill set was necessary for continuing to work in this business?
I think once I spent a couple of years just acting, I realized that just acting wasn't going to cut it. You know, I also, that being said, I wasn't a very good actor when I started. You know, I did it as a kid with my dad and I learned from him, but then I had taken 10 years away from it until I was late teens, early 20s. And yeah, I just, you know, I was living a life as an athlete and, you know, just going to school and living life, and I hadn't really studied the craft. So, you know, if you really dedicate yourself to the craft of acting, if you take the workshops, if you know, really just, you know, study the greats, you know, read the plays, you know, go to, you know, theater shows, you know, see the Broadway actors, those, if you really dive into that world, I think you can just do acting. But for me, I kind of say this sometimes, it's just, I don't know if I should say it, but sometimes I tell myself, well, maybe I don't love acting enough to just do acting, because I just find enjoyment in other things too. You know, I love acting, but I don't know if I could see myself just doing it. I just, I've always been very just all over the place in terms of interests. You know, I had a YouTube channel I thought about starting when I was 19 years old called Hobby of the Month, where I would do a different hobby every month, like a different sport or drawing or different things, and just make videos about it. That's just been my brain since I was young. Just been interested in everything.
Well, you did your own sort of docu-series, though, on BMX bikers was it in Florida?
Yep.
Okay, so you have done other things. But I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to do other things. And people can get caught up in the life of being an actor and never actually progress. You know, you can, nothing against acting classes and casting director workshops, but you know, you can get caught in this town sort of doing that and not really fully going anywhere. So I think it's great that you want to make your own thing.
Yeah, and the thing about doing that, right, if you're just pursuing that as an actor, here's the thing. It's the mindset thing, right? If you're doing all these classes and you're going to these casting director workshops with the need to get a job or to get picked or to get booked, then you're already dead in the water, because people can smell when you need it. So I think one of the reasons I started producing and writing is because I didn't want to need it. I wanted to just pick myself and say, I don't need anybody to validate me. I'm going to tell the stories I want to tell. And when I started doing that, people started seeing my work and bringing me on. And then you start to see them as a collaborator, not as someone that's above you.
What did Mind Games teach you about writing a feature film?
Mind Games, what did it teach me about writing a feature film? It taught me a lot. I would say, you know, that was the first time I had brought in, that was the first time I had brought someone else on to revise the script that wasn't a writer. For example, there was a lot of military jargon, military uniforms in the script. So I had an acting classmate who was in the military. I think he had done 12 years. I forget what it was. He did halo jumps, you know, high altitude, low opening or something like that. When you know, he was very, you know, he's kind of I think he was an Army Ranger. He he had a lot of experience. I brought him on the script to give his expertise on to make sure we were accurate with the military stuff. And I think that's very important if you're doing, you know, sometimes people do these movies, whether it's a military movie or, you know, different niche movies like that. And then the people that are in that community are, you know, they say, oh, that's not really accurate, you know. And I just did a skimboarding movie. And what was the first thing I did before I even made the film or did anything, did any casting or raised money? The first thing I did was go to skimboarders. And I told them about the idea. And I started hanging out with them, and I started getting into skimboarding a bit more than, you know, I did it as a kid a bit, but I got back into it and just, you know, really just kind of watched them and saw how they talked and what they said, and, you know, oh, what trick is that? Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good trick, all right, you know, write that down. And I think I might have made one or two mistakes in the competition scene at the very end of the movie where I think he says the wrong trick. It was supposed to be front side, but he said backside. But in the edit, I don't have the announcer saying the other one, so I had to use it. And I'm like, okay, this one's going to squeak by, you know. But I think Mind Games taught me to really respect the reality of whatever the story is, you know. So the military, the skimboarder, you know, their life. You want these people, when they go watch a movie about what they do, you don't want them to cringe.
At the end of the day, what are some of the biggest lessons you learned from making Mind Games?
From making Mind Games, some of the biggest lessons. Yeah, it's possible. No excuses are valid. You know, when I first made my first ever short film or anything, it was with an iPhone. I did stop motion animation with Legos because I didn't have actors. So from that through Mind Games, you know, we raised a couple bucks. Sure, that was to fly out a couple, you know, fairly known actors that, you know, were worth the money. But you don't need that to make a feature film. You could make a feature film in this room right here with me and you, and we can sit here for 90 minutes on a movie screen together. So it's possible. That's what Mind Games taught me.
How long did it take you to raise your full budget for off-rip?
Our full budget for off-rip, I would say it took us, well, I wrote the script in 2020. We started making pitches and videos and trying different avenues of getting the film made, attaching talent, et cetera, until we got it funded in 2022, the end of 22, beginning of 23. So it was about 2.5, 3 years to get the initial seed money. And then the seed money grew and got a couple other people involved into early 2023, and then shot the movie in March and April of 2023. So 2.5, 3 years.
And where did the initial money for your feature off-rip come from, the seed money? What was the first?
Yeah, well, so the funny thing is Jake and I always see ourselves as already having money, because at the end of the day, like Mind Games, we can make the film. We don't actually need money. So the way we like to pitch movies and talk about it to collaborators, investors, et cetera, is, hey, this is the movie we're making. We're going to shoot it next March and in this date. If you'd like to be a part of it, let us know. We're going to be shooting it. So regardless, if we get money or not, we're making the movie. We made a plan of how we were going to make the movie with a couple Blackmagic cameras and just all local actors just doing it for free. We'll do the wardrobe ourselves, et cetera, everything that we've done for previous movies. And then, you know, people see the trains moving and they see the work and they see the proof of what we've done and what we've completed and what we've made, and they jump on. And it's one of those things where, you know, you just have to believe that you are enough. You know, you are the money. You know, if I'm a writer, director, editor, actor, and Jake's a shooter, DP, camera op, and can gaff, I mean, we have $100,000 right there. Easy.
So it goes back to what we talked about earlier with some of these workshops and things, where if people feel like you're too desperate, it repels people. But if you realize that, you know, you already kind of are making this film, do you want to be a part of it or not? We're doing this regardless.
Yeah.
That it attracts people.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily do it to try to attract people, but it's just something I've noticed. When you have a perspective of, hey, please do this so I can do that. Please give me this so I can make this. That's just not, it feels needy and amateur, and it's just not attractive, you know? Imagine a guy coming up to a girl at a bar. Hey, could you please talk to me so maybe you could be my girlfriend one day? Like, it's just, that's not attractive. The girl wants a guy who's, you know, because he might sit at the bar and, you know, he might say something and look over and, you know, whatever. But the people want people that don't need them.
True.
You know, that's kind of, it's a psychological kind of thing. And so we just decided, you know, we're just going to make our own stuff. And if we meet people along the way that want to join the team, that's great. And if they don't, then we'll just make movies, just us two.
Sorry, I was just thinking of Jon Favreau and Vince Vaughn in Swingers. You're so money, and he was always trying to like talk him up.
Yeah.
Whereas the Vince Vaughn character didn't need anybody, and at times was sort of obnoxious, but people were drawn to him. Yeah. So anyway, bad reference.
It's a true reality. You know, it's just the way it is.
Right. No, it's very true, and yeah.
But it has to be authentic, though, right? Like if you're putting on this thing of, oh, I don't need this, you know, for when I would sometimes, and even the recent couple of years, I would get auditions for big shows or movies, and I would really feel like, oh, I really need this, I really want this, but I would say, I don't need this stupid, no, it's just whatever, it's just a show, whatever. But I still felt that I needed it. I still felt it was bigger and this thing that I didn't quite, deserve. And, I don't think we truly get things until we're ready for them, and until we truly are content and truly feel that, we're worth it. I think that's when it comes.
I had someone tell me that was a manager. They said that they saw people get things. It's not that they didn't want to be an actor, but there was just something that they had within them that it wasn't going to affect them whether they got it or not, and that's how they just attracted all this sort of success to them. It's probably a bad example, but I think there is something in the universe or just human nature that repels too much neediness. Mm-hmm. How do you find potential investors?
I think you find potential investors by just living life and just continuing to do your craft and grow. And those people will just come along. Whether it's an investor like Jake, who is my partner, I see him as an investor because the amount of free work that he's done with me, that's an investment. And then different people that, maybe have a big chunk of money to throw at it, yeah, that's an investment as well. I think it just comes from doing your craft and meeting people and exploring and being a good person, but not seeing people for that. You can't just see someone, oh, this person has a lot of money, let me make friends with them. Like, you don't do that. You're not ready. You're not ready to receive money for a film if that's how you see them, So I think it's just, living your life, and, you get these ideas, and then, just to talk specifically about getting a certain person invested in a movie, Jake always talks about there has to be a win-win. So for example, if a certain, something that often happens on the indie film level, people will find an investor that wants to be an actor in a movie. And so they'll invest so that they can act in the film. That's what they get out of it, right? Or say the investor really likes a certain sport, or, you could have a conversation, right? If someone's interested in making movies, okay, well, what do you want out of this? Just ask what they want. Because if they're investing, right? If I'm buying something from the store, it's because I want something from it. I want a product that, gratifies me in a certain way. So if they're investing in a movie, it's not for money, because people know movies don't make money as much as, other investments do. So you really just have to see why they're interested and what story aligns, right? Like, I have a project that I'm collaborating with that I brought an original idea to these two screenwriters who have another investor that we've worked on a movie with. And I had 3 different ideas that I was telling them about. But I didn't tell them about all 3 of them, though, because I knew which script was perfect for this group. I knew what was up their alley. So I said, oh, because they had a slate of 2 films, they were looking for a third, and I said, yeah, I got three different scripts, but I think this one you guys would like. And because, you kind of just read the room, I guess people say, or you know what people want, and you know what they want to get out of it. So just finding the alignment, because not every investor is right for every project.
How do you find potential investors?
So, for example, our main investor for Off Rip was found because of a potential job. So Jake had been applying for a cinematography job on IMDb Pro, found this person who was funding their own short film, and he brought me on. He introduced me to potentially direct, and I was on as the director, and he was on as the DP, and then this financier for the short film decided they didn't want to do the movie anymore. And it was because they weren't comfortable ready as an actor yet. And so then Jake, he took a couple weeks, and then Jake circled back and said, well, we make movies. What do you think about this one? And that ended up being our investor, just from a job board. So it's really sporadic. I don't know if there's one way to do it. I think it's just, like I said, continuing to focus on your craft and get work or make work and just, keep going, and eventually you meet people.
Can you talk about how many businesses invested in Off Rip?
Yeah, so I would say there were three different investments. And then if you count non-financial, but what I call other valuable consideration investments or sweat equity, that would be another 3 that is included in the disbursement of the back end of things. So it would be 6.
And did you write pitch letters to them? Did you actually go to their offices? How did you approach them?
No pitch letters or anything like that. I think I may have misunderstood. I meant just the investors for the film. In terms of businesses, we had a couple sponsors. So we had companies like Shore Pound who came on board and helped us create the whole competition sequences, and they built out, what a real competition would look like for skimboarding. I went and visited and I took videos and photos, and then he said, oh man, I could bring all this stuff and set this up for you. And I was like, bro, that would be amazing if you could. And he gave us, the jerseys that we had all the skimboarders wear. But the thing with that, right, it was a win-win. His brand, Shore Pound, is the face of our skim competition movie, of our skimboard movie, right? So the main character, one of the opening shots, is wearing his jersey. So it's a win-win in that sense. And we also had Zap skimboards come down, and they gave us skimboards for the movie and sponsored it in that way. So.
But sorry, how are you meeting these people? You're reaching out to them?
Oh yeah, just reaching out.
Okay.
So Shore Pound was, one of their team riders was Sterling, who's the first skimboarder that I reached out to and made friends with. And then Zap, we just cold called, and they didn't answer. And so they were in Venice Beach, two hours south of us. And we just drove down and knocked on the door and just said, hey, we're looking for, there was Zach and Max Smets, the owners, and said, hey, we're looking for Max. And the guy, he's like, I'll get him. And then we get him and say, hey, we're doing a skimboarding movie. We'd love for you guys to be a part of it. This is like kind of what it's about. And, are you interested? So yeah, just approaching them.
You have a video on your YouTube channel where you're creating a pitch deck for Off-Rip. And one of the characters is sort of inspired by, or has in your mind you wanted as Matthew McConaughey. Mm-hmm. Great choice. Can you tell us your route in trying to pitch the idea to him, or maybe you never actually spoke with him?
Yeah, it was a very unconventional route trying to get Matthew in the film. So Jake and I were, thinking about ways we could get in touch. We had obviously already tried reaching out to his reps, which, even if those guys get back to you, the first thing they say is it greenlit? Is it funded? No, it wasn't funded. We didn't have $5-10 million or 20 million or, offer or whatever. So yeah, it was very unconventional. We were sitting one day and thinking about real estate. I think we were thinking about real estate signs and things in yards. And I think at some point we just came across the idea of a wanted poster, like a Western style wanted poster, and putting his face on it. And so, yeah, that's what we did. We made a pitch video in a Western town called Dry Creek out in Florida. And I talked to the camera, and I'm in a cowboy outfit, and I got a duster on. That was actually my mom's hand-me-down thing from generations ago. And talking to the camera, I'm looking for a man you might have seen before. His name's Matthew McConaughey. I have this wanted poster in the video, and it goes off into this 3-minute pitch of why he's perfect for the movie. And then obviously we have these flyers, but we're in Florida. Austin, where he's around, is 17 hours away driving time. So we make the drive. We go to Austin. We get an Airbnb. This is right around Christmas time, and we started flyering the city. We started putting up flyers on all of the telephone poles, we bought a big old staple gun, which actually I found the staple gun wasn't really working that well. They would kind of fall off and rip off. We tried tape. It was, I don't know, we weren't the best technically at doing it. But then we would then we went to the University of Austin at Texas, where he's a professor. And we taped, wanted flyers on different doors of the campus. We put them in the newspaper bins, of the campus where it opens up. You can grab a newspaper. We put them in the glass there, the front-facing glass. We put them everywhere. And then I had printed a couple of drafts of the script, and I had grabbed 2 Christmas cards because it was right before Christmas. It was December 20th or so. They wouldn't let us drop off the script. And I looking back, I was a bit younger. And to me, I was like, oh, this is great. This doesn't seem crazy. Like, I didn't think it seemed wild or over the top or too far. But looking back at it now, 3 years later, I'm like, yeah, maybe that was a little weird. Like, maybe we shouldn't have taken it that far. But you know what the funny thing is that's what got our movie funded. Because when our main investor saw that we went to that length just to get an actor in the movie, they said, wow, you guys will do anything. You're trustworthy to make this film. I believe in you because you drove across the country. You put flyers up. You did everything to get this actor's attention. I want to invest in you.
Wow. And they saw you do this in the meantime, or you had already reached out to them?
Yeah, it was, so by the time we spoke with this person who was an investor on the film, this was a couple years down the line. This was just an old story we had at the time. We tried all kinds of things. We wanted to get Matthew McConaughey. We drove across the country. Check out this pitch video we made for him. And then they watched it. You made this? Wow, you drove across the country? It was just one of those things where, and back to what I was saying, if you just do it, right? So that was us doing it. That was us making the movie. We didn't have the funds to make the movie the way we wanted to make it, but we knew we could do something about trying to get an actor. And so there was always, the ball moving, rolling, So I think just, sticking to that is key.
That's great. I love that story. Have you read his book?
Oh yeah, Green Lights?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe one day. Maybe it's
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll meet him on I know he's attached to a Taylor Sheridan TV show, so we'll see if we cross paths.
I believe it's taken you over 4 years to make and release Off Rip.
Mm-hmm.
Why was making this film so important to you?
Making this film, I think, was important to me. The same reason any film I make is important to me is just because at the time I'm making it, I'm inspired to make it. It feels like it has gravity in my own life, and it feels like it could be something that could benefit other people and impact them. And it was kind of a win-win for me because it was the first movie of its kind, being that it's about skimboarding. There's never been one before. And it was a movie I originally had written because when I was living in that town, working on those on our little indie films, I was just thinking about, what's something that I can make, on a doable budget that takes place here that we can do. And I came across kind of this idea of making a skimboarding film. And I think it was important to me at the time just because it was what I felt like I could do and take the next steps in my career. And I also found a through line and a message that made sense to me that was important enough to tell.
And you believed in the main character? Does that main character have parts of you in it?
Oh, the main character is like fully based off of me. Yeah, I mean, it's a little different in the sense of I didn't grow up as a skimboarder. I more so skateboarded and, played football. But I loved the beach, and I grew up on the beach. And the character is heavily infused with my own persona in it, and it was not a stretch at all. Outside of a couple different family dynamics, my mom always says, "Oh, did you make Jan based off of me?" Which is the mom character, and I'm like, no, she's not based on you. She's actually based off of such and such. And then obviously, and I always say that the little brother character is the little brother that I never had because I always begged my mom and dad for a little brother growing up. And so I didn't get to have one, but I got to have one in Off Rip.
Imagine if you were going to teach a class on producing a movie to someone who's a group of people, let's say, that have never done a movie. How would you take us through the whole process?
Is this just as a producer or is this as an artist?
As a producer.
Okay, if I were teaching people how to produce a movie just as the producer role, I would say do some research and find the most talented artist, director, DP combo that you can find where you live and watch all their stuff, take a meeting with them, tell them that you believe in them, and tell them that you want to work with them and see if it's a good fit, and then start putting pieces together. Well, what are you guys doing next? Oh, I have this idea about this. Great. You need like locations for that. You could help them start looking for locations. You could help them, start finding the wardrobe, start, finding anything that they need creatively to bring it to life. Whether if it's a short film, it'd be much easier, of course. And if it's a fundraising thing, well, that's a different story. But yeah, producing, I would say just see how you can add value, how you can help. You know, a lot of people want producer credits and they don't really produce. They just don't really do much at all, honestly. Which is interesting when people ask for producer credits and, you know, it's like, well, what did you do? You know, I think the biggest thing is just to add fuel to the fire. If you're not the writer, director, if you're not the main storyteller, if you're a producer, then it's really just, you have to see yourself as a supportive, you know, position, a person who's here to elevate the story, and the person who's creating it, who's at the head of it, you know, you're in support, in service to that story. And so, yeah, just see what you can do to make things happen every day, you know.
What are the essentials to every production?
In what way? Technically, or like?
Well, it could be technical. It could also be working with people skills.
Oh, okay. Yeah, in terms of with people for productions, I would say the essentials are realizing that yes, there are heads of departments and people are at certain positions in the hierarchy, which I think should be respected to a certain extent, but also at the same time, everyone is on the same level. No one is above anybody. I don't care if it's the star actor or the PA. You know, yes, you have to accommodate certain things. Maybe if someone's agent or the director maybe is a certain way, sure. I just don't like when people just think they're above people. Honestly, I really don't like that. I think walking in gratitude is the greatest thing you can do. Whenever I'm on a set and I'm making a film, the amount of times, and I say it genuinely, I don't force it. The amount of times I look around at people and I say, honestly, thank you guys so much for doing this. You're doing such a great job. Like, bro, the sound, it sounds amazing. Or, you know, that, you know, thank you for carrying that heavy gear. I know, and I think one of the reasons I'm so grateful is because I've done everything. I've been a grip on sets and I've lifted the heavy stands and the sandbags and the whole thing and carried everything out of the truck. And when I've made my own productions, you know, I've done everything. So I know what it's like to do the different jobs. But I think if everyone sees each other as an equal, as a partner, as a teammate, I think that's the key to a successful production.
If you were teaching a class on producing, what are some mistakes that you would want to impart to your students to stay away from, you know, that you kind of learned?
In just producing?
In just producing.
Yeah, the thing is I've never just been a producer, so I would have to think about that.
Well, then we could, oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, mistakes, I guess. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I've realized in co-productions when I'm working with other people, whether it's another writer or if I'm bringing a different director on, which I've done in the past, I think you have to realize that people are going to have their own input and their own creative say, and you have to establish, like I said, there should be a hierarchy, right? And I think it should be established. Communication should be very clear. So if anyone is, you know, overstepping or going, you know, beyond what their position is, you know, that can be addressed, right? I think that's one of the biggest mistakes in how sets fall apart is if, you know, for example, we've had issues on our, not issues, but on our latest films, you know, sometimes the DP, Jake, and myself as a director, and this time was different because I had a co-director who I was in support of because it was her original script and she brought me on. And so I told her from the start, I am your co-director. I'm supporting you because if we don't establish that you're the head of it, it'll get muddy at some point. So establishing that, the hierarchy, and being a, you know, and, you know, if people can't, like, aren't willing to kind of submit to that. I mean, you look at every structure, like the military, people submit to their authority. That's just how it is. There's a queen bee in the hive, you know. So just having that clear as day, I think, is important. And then you know, also what I learned is the going back to the military thing. The commanders, right? They're the generals, right? The sergeants. If they have the battle plans and they're going over the map, they're doing it in their private tent, and they're conversing and they're looking at the battle plans and they're, you know, disputing it among each other. And then when it's all figured out, then they go into the midst of the 1,000, you know, infantrymen, and they say, we're going north. This is where we're going, right? So one of my biggest mistakes was having those intimate conversations in front of the whole cast and crew. what do you think if we shot this that way? Okay, and then the AD will come up, well, what if you did this shot? And then the actor will be like, oh, you should shoot it this way. And then that's when we realize, ding, okay, those are private conversations between the DP, director, and nobody else. We have to really figure this out, because otherwise people are just gonna be all over the place. And then people are talking, and it's this whole thing, and there's just a rumbling noise through the whole studio, and just, it becomes a mess. So clear communication of the hierarchy and having your battle plans locked in.
And you're also setting precedents that we've got this. Mm-hmm. We don't need input from this person. I'm sure they have great ideas, but this is our show. And okay, that's great. I like that. How did you get hundreds of extras for free on an independent movie?
Yeah, I think the thing about our movie, which was special, was that we had such a community around it. So there were so many people that really took to the film, that had stake in it. The skimboarders who had their friends, the people who were, had their companies around and wanted their friends to be a part of it and see what they're doing. And then some of the extras in different areas. So for example, downtown St. Pete, we just had some of our team just going out to people on the street and asking if they wanted to be in a movie. And, they did. Now, free extras, I wouldn't say are the best idea if you can afford extras, because paid extras know what they're doing, and they know, they know to hit their ones and their twos, and they're not, belligerent and yelling or talking or, doing these things that are distracting when you're trying to direct, 4 actors in a scene in the midst of extras. So I think free actors are great to start with, but I think in general, paid extras are always great.
Can you talk about the dilemma of not wanting to cast yourself as the lead actor for Off Rip?
Yeah, with Off Rip, I really wanted to focus on making a great film. And I had previously cast myself and directed multiple short films. And I had also led feature films as an actor. And so I knew what it took. And so I kind of had the mentality of, I can only give 100%. And if I have 2 things, I can either give 75, 25, 50, 50, 60, 40, whatever it is. And I had kind of those fears of, not being able to fully be in service to each role at my greatest ability. But, what I found with Off Rip was that it was so in me, because I had done it for a handful of years, getting the film made. And I'd been with the story for so long, and it was so close to me that it was doable. But I initially didn't want to do it just for the sake of the story. I wanted to really be in service to it and make sure that it was the best. And I did a casting for Chris for the main character, and I watched 400 audition tapes. And I had 2 guys I really liked. I had 2 guys I liked. And one guy totally didn't fit the part, didn't look the part at all. So, which really helped me as an actor, because I realized that, okay, if I don't get picked for something, it's not because I'm not talented. I just might not look the part, I might not sound right, whatever it is. But then I had this other guy that I liked, but he still just wasn't quite the vibe, and he didn't quite look enough the part either. There was an essence that I needed. And I just had multiple friends and family and cast and crew and, my partners and everyone just saying, you got to play it, man. You got to play it. And so I did.
Without naming any names, but have you watched certain films where the lead actor was also the director and you felt, maybe the performance was this, or, how, because you are spreading yourself so thin, and there's certain projects, I don't want to name them, where yes, it was pulled off, others where, you can see where maybe it wasn't totally nailed.
What's funny is it was the opposite for me. So one of the main things, I totally forgot this until you said this, I didn't even know if I could do it until I had watched, and I don't know why in pre-production I watched this movie, but it was Bradley Cooper's movie where he starred in as the singer.
A Star is Born?
A Star is Born.
Oh, yeah.
With Lady
Excellent.
Gaga. And when I had watched his visceral performance, and I had watched how beautiful that movie was,
Right.
and it hit me so hard. And I had saw that he starred in it and directed it. That's what gave me confidence to do it for Off Rip.
Okay. Excellent example. Yeah. Okay, so it can be done.
Yeah.
Your final thoughts on producing a movie?
My final thoughts. I don't know if I have final thoughts on producing. It's a very ongoing thing. I guess in this moment, producing is hard. It's a lot of work, and I don't know if it's appreciated as much as any of the other jobs. So you have to really have a reason and a passion for it. If you're doing it to try and leverage your career and get something else, you should probably just do that thing, or at least produce and do that thing. So for example, if you want to be an actor or director, you should produce your own films that you direct or act in. But if you're producing just because you want to be an actor and you want to meet more people and you're just going to produce for a while, but you don't really like producing, just don't do it, because it's a lot of work, and it's not gratifying unless you love it. And yeah, it's a very, it's a job that it's almost not even it's very entrepreneurial. You kind of have to have that spirit of someone who just goes and makes things happen. And so if you find yourself naturally being that kind of person who creates businesses or knocks on doors and gets things happening and gets things going, well then producing might be for you.
Do you like a challenge like that?
Like what?
Well, approaching businesses or prospective investors and putting together something you can present to them.
Yeah, I like a challenge like that if I'm inspired by the movie. If I'm inspired by if I have this script, this calling, like this thing I've talked about this burning desire to make this thing, I'm willing to do anything for it. So, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. It doesn't matter where I'm at in the world. If I have a story that I feel needs to get made, it's going to get made.